Got it. Perfect. Guess we can get started here. So hello, everyone. Just so everyone knows, we will be recording. The recording notice just went off there, so this session can be sent out afterwards, and we can actually review these discussions later. So that would be good. But yeah, I just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction here. So my name is Graham, Graham Dearden, and I'm here from the Access team to chat a little bit about Access and just start off this webinar in the right way. And I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping before I read out this land acknowledgement here, and note that we are going to be taking questions, but we'll be taking questions at the end. So if you have questions as the presentation is going on, please put them into the chat, and then we will be able to answer them at the end of the presentation. And I think that's the only housekeeping thing that I need to go over here. So I just want to do a quick land acknowledgement. Today's guests may be situated on treaty lands, unceded territory, and contemporary homes of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people across what we call Canada. The presenters today are situated in Amiskwichi, Wisconsin, Papachaise Cree First Nations, Treaty 6 territory, and Métis Nation Regional Zone 4. And we want to affirm the historical and current relationship to the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux. Here we are all treaty people. Treaties hold the keys to a new path forward as living agreements regarding relationships between First Nations and settlers in the past, for the present, and towards the future. And it is our duty to respect and honor the treaties, for as long as the sun shines, the grasses grow, and the rivers flow. Okay, so today's webinar on HR is brought to you by Access Shared Services, and I just wanted to give a quick intro to our team here. So the operational team is here today. We've got myself focusing on governance, funding, and grants. Corrine Rempel is also here, who will be taking care of the questions at the end, and she's the project lead for Access and does service development work. And then Danielle Hastings is here as well as our operations and client services person. And she is going to be doing the main question asking today. She'll be kind of moderator. So yeah, just getting my notes ready here. So Access is guided by the sixth cooperative principle. And the sixth cooperative principle, if people aren't already aware, is cooperation amongst cooperatives. So Access is a co-op, and it offers innovative collaborative solutions that will provide a collective of service providers and group purchasing for its members. We invite members to build strength and community through collaboration. So Access is built by nonprofits and cooperative organizations across Canada, and Access works to fill service gaps and increase efficiencies, allowing cooperatives, nonprofits, social enterprises, and daycares more time to focus on what they do best. And you can see our vision and our mission is up there on the screen there. So the Access team, we recognize that social purpose organizations require efficient and effective back office administration and management to be successful, but searching for the right amount of support from service providers who understand their unique needs can be daunting. So the question that we have is, if you could take one administrative task off your desk, what would it be? Would it be HR or IT or payroll? Those are some possible things that a nonprofit or a co-op or a social enterprise might need to take care of in any given day. And we like to talk about Access as using co-aligned shared service providers as needed in an efficient way to provide the right amount of support to fit the needs, budgets, and values of the organizations we serve. So we focus on filling those service gaps so we can allow organizations the time to do what they do best. We have also some additional services listed on this slide here. So in addition to the current service offerings that we're developing, we are also developing marketing, benefits, insurance, pension plan, and group buying. So at the end of the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions about Access as well as HR if you'd like. And at this time, I'm going to move on to the Spotlight series on HR. So I'm going to pass it over to Danny.
Thanks, Graham. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker today, Violet Poon. Violet is the HR lead for Access Shared Services. As a consultant and facilitator, Violet has worked with more than 250 internationally educated professionals from over 50 countries to help them successfully gain employment in their professions in Canada. Violet has facilitated workshops for various sectors, including nonprofits, co-ops, engineering, healthcare, hospitality, and government. Violet specializes in the development of recruitment and retention strategies for diverse workplaces and in educating managers. She's a strong speaker and facilitates workshops that are engaging and hands-on. And she also provides action steps for the workplace. Additionally, Violet is a career advisor and coach to many, including engineers, accountants, and technical professionals. Welcome, Violet, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Danny, for having me. And thank you, everybody, for attending today.
So we'll move on into our first question. A recent survey conducted by Maru Public Opinion found that businesses are struggling to keep and recruit the best people to meet their labor needs. 33% have trouble finding workers. 46% say the talent shortage grew because of the pandemic. 32% are seeing staff leave for a better salary. 29% are losing staff wanting to make a career change, and 17% have staff leaving to take on a more senior role. How do social purpose organizations keep and recruit the best people for their organization? Violet, can you share some insight on how workforce planning and recruitment strategies can help?
Yeah, certainly, Danny. So I will actually talk a little bit about some of the trends that I'm seeing for the organizations that I recruit for. So I will say definitely in the last few years, there has been some significant changes. Probably about a year ago, we did see a decline in the number of applications that we were receiving when we were recruiting for positions. So we were finding that I think the impact, there was likely impacts in a variety of different ways, including the pandemic and also how people looked at their work and what they wanted to do in work. So as somebody who does do recruitment on behalf of a number of organizations, I also started to see those impacts and those effects. So there was a time last year when it was difficult to even attract people to apply to our job postings. But we did start, like personally, I started to see a shift later of last year in terms of more people that were applying for the positions that I was recruiting for. That being said, though, we did see that in those candidates that were applying for those jobs, that they didn't necessarily meet, some of the qualifications that we were seeking. So I think that the impact of on recruitment and how people are seeing work and how they want to work has actually led to organizations and who are looking for people to really start to think, I'll say, a little bit outside of the box. So some of the strategies that I've been working with organizations with is really trying to highlight what the organization is all about and how to do that. So I'll give one example. In terms of values, the organizations that I work with are all community minded. So whether they're a nonprofit organization or a cooperative, a lot of it is about the impact on community and how we impact community and how we do that aligned with the values of the organization. So one strategy that we have implemented and I've implemented with organizations is really looking at how do you recruit so that you can attract people through sharing with them who you are about with regards to your values and how you work aligned to those values. And I think it's a different type of approach. It can be a little bit unique and maybe not something that, let's say, corporations are doing, because they may tend to focus more about what the job is or the perks of the job and the salary. But I think with community-minded organizations and social purpose organizations, we actually do have an opportunity because we want to share with people about, if you work with us, what is the impact that you can make in community? And people are attracted, I think, actually one of the things that attracts people is that they want to do things that make them feel good. I've actually heard people, job seekers, tell me that they're looking to work in industries and sectors where they know that they can make a difference in their community and make a difference in people's lives. So even though I will say, even though there has been some challenges in recruitment, I look at it as actually opportunity for us to be creative, to attract people to look at, our sector, to look at what our jobs are, but also an opportunity to really share, this is who we are and how we work. This is our values. This is what's important to us in our workplace culture. So I actually think there's lots of opportunities in how we're recruiting now, and looking outside of the box of traditional recruiting strategies. I'll say in the past that sometimes maybe we take for granted would generate people's interest and candidates. So it's actually, for me, it's actually been an opportunity to really work with organizations to help them to understand who they are, how they work, and how do we try to put that on paper to share that with potential employees for their organizations.
Thanks, Violet. That's very valuable insight.
Mhm.
Moving on to our next question. We are seeing a growing trend in remote and hybrid roles. Are there, oh, excuse me, missed my notes. And there are
Mhm.
benefits of going this route, such as increased flexibility and productivity with less time spent commuting, smaller office footprints, reducing company overhead costs, having an expanded talent pool with access to the global workforce. However, with all the benefits, managing remote employees can come with its own set of challenges. Can you share some of the strategies social purpose organizations can implement to manage remote or hybrid employees?
Yeah, this is actually probably one of the most common questions that I actually get from working with organizations as the challenge has presented itself from being either fully remote or shifting to what I would say is a hybrid model. There Definitely the way that we are working has changed. And I think some of those expectations of also people's comfort level and how they were working before is now a little, from an employer perspective and as organizations, we are also looking at how people are working and what those environments are, and how to kind of adapt to individuals' needs and our employees' needs, but at the same time understanding kind of our business needs and our organization needs, and as well as our community that we're serving, all of those needs. So definitely I feel that there has been some challenges, and this is one of the common questions that I actually get asked, is that how do we engage our employees when we are not physically either all in one place, or we have a hybrid model and we have some people in our workspace in our offices and some people that are not. So some of the strategies that I've worked with organizations with is really to be intentional when you are talking about, for example, meetings. And how do you conduct meetings? And is that going to be all in a virtual space, or do you also have in-person type meetings and in-person type activities? So what I don't want to get lost is that with organizations, like that, they want to be flexible and they want to meet their employee needs and be mindful of that, and also have a lens of, caring about the wellness of their employees. But at the same time, there are certain expectations to the work that needs to get done, and as well as certain outcomes. And so how do employers kind of balance that? I think what's really important is also to keep in mind is trying to engage employees so that they are inspired to still do their work, they're motivated to do their work. There is that constant communication and looking at ways to do that. So whether that be doing, maybe more check-ins with your employees, maybe looking at doing more team building type activities that you could implement in a virtual world or in-person world and blending those together. think that's important to do as well. And then looking at really, again, also how you are communicating with employees. So sometimes we can use our virtual tools quite excessively in terms of an example of using like Microsoft Teams or emails, and that can be overwhelming for people. So I think it's really trying to understand also what works best for people that are working remote or hybrid, and how do we adapt as employers and organizations and leaders to really be able to support people, but also be able to uh, be clear on what the expectations are of their role and the work that we're doing, and how we're doing it. So this is I think this, Danny, I think this is one of the most common, I think, questions and concerns that I have from organizations, of trying to keep them engaged, trying to keep people inspired, trying to have a cohesive team, trying to even maintain like what our, I'll say, workplace culture is like. So, but I feel that there's some strategies around that that organizations are implementing that are working.
Thanks, Violet. So I inadvertently jumped a slide, so I'm just going to move back one, so we can talk about retaining employees. So now that the social purpose organization has recruited an employee, their engagement and retention, as you just touched on, are the next hurdles. And so just jumping back to those survey results, from those who said hiring in the current environment is difficult, 46% have already increased wages, 27% have increased benefits, and 19% have introduced a shorter work week. What are the strategies an SPO can use to retain employees, and how vital are employee engagement and employee benefits to that process?
So what I would say, Danny, is that the information that you just provided is really capturing, compensation as a whole. So I look at it as one aspect of compensation. So sometimes organizations, like social purpose organizations, may say, well, we understand we have some limitations when it comes to our salaries, and also job seekers also know that as well. But when we look at full compensation, and you mentioned a shorter work week or a 4-day work week, or looking at other benefits such as, I'll say, extended health benefits, dental benefits, how we're working in terms of the flexibility with the days of work that we're working, or maybe a shorter work week, all of that is kind of formulates the compensation that we may offer to employees. And I don't want that to sometimes get lost, or just like sometimes people just look at the salary, and I really feel it's important to look at the compensation perspective when you're, as an employer, of what you can offer your employees. Because I think I'll give an example. So one of my organizations offers like paid time off to volunteer in the community, which I think is an amazing thing to do, because really it shows that they want their employees, and they're encouraging them to give back to the community and volunteer. But from an employer perspective and an organization perspective, they also support that community-minded kind of work that they want their employees to do. So I think compensation needs to be looked at as a whole when we're talking about like pay and salary. Another aspect of it is really, when you're looking at a strategy to retain employees, it really does start from the onboarding process. So some of the things that I have done for organizations directly in this is really kind of reviewing what the onboarding looks like, what they currently have for onboarding. And some organizations may not really even have a process. They may have, a few hours that they spend with a new employee, or they may have a checklist or document. But really, I think it starts off with the experience of an employee really starts off with that onboarding and that first few months that they have within their role. So as an employer, and as an organization, I think that's a really great time also to look at not just the onboarding and the process, but again, like how you're sharing information, what information are you sharing? So as a cooperative, for example, and maybe if you're bringing on somebody that's not so familiar with a cooperative, is really having those learning opportunities for them to understand, you know, what is a cooperative, and what is the impact that we can make in our community? Why is this work that we're doing important? So I think that starts from the onboarding and throughout those first few months that an employee has joined an organization. And that is kind of a key period, because it is
Mhm.
an opportunity. Like, often we look at it as an opportunity for the employer to get to know the employee. You know, we use that term in terms of fit. I'm not in favor necessarily of that word, but I think it's an opportunity for people to start to get to know the person, how they prefer to work, how our kind of culture is aligned with how we've been working, what's important for them to know about the way that we work, the impact that we have in the community. So I think those first few months are important to really evaluate kind of what is, how do you do that, and what is your process. Um, Another thing that I will say is, when you have people, you know, that are newer to the organization, is also looking at ways of providing them with maybe a little bit more communication, or a little bit maybe pairing them with a mentor, for example. Somebody, and that's something that I've supported an organization with, looking at maybe matching somebody that's been with the organization longer with somebody that's now newly joined, and can provide them with some support and guidance, because I think also when people feel that they're supported, that it gives them a positive experience. I mean, I think the one thing is that when it comes to retention, I mean, one of the challenges is that when you're looking at trying to keep people, is part of that is succession planning as well. So what opportunities can we provide to our employees for development and growth? Because we might have limitations on, you know, their salary, let's say. So I think that this sector is unique, because once people get into the sector, like an example is for me, I'm never going to leave this sector, because my heart is too deep into this work of community work. And I think that that's why people couldn't actually stay in this work once they get into the work, because they know that it does make an impact, and they know that they're making a difference for people. So I think part of the retention is really just also people understanding that their work does make a difference, and you are supporting and helping community in some way. So yeah, so sometimes so I think really my key point is that it's not just about salary, but I think from an employer perspective and organization perspective, there's lots of things that we can do to have positive experiences for our employees.
Thanks, Violet. I love that example of doing a course, you know, to share what you're doing and the impact that you're trying to achieve, like a Co-ops 101 course or what have you. It is a very valuable asset to have your employees know what your mission is and what you're trying to achieve in the community. All right, on to our next question. So, with initiatives like the 50/30 Challenge, we're seeing growing support for diversity actions in many Canadian organizations. How can social purpose organizations adopt practices to improve equity through their HR practices and policy?
Mhm. Yeah, this is actually one of my personal values, I'll say. So I've been really fortunate, because many years ago I started to do work in working with employers who had diverse workplaces. And at the time it was all about like diversity. That was kind of the theme of, you know, we have diverse workplaces, what can we do? And I would go in and work with employers and talk about their processes, talk about how to be more inclusive, understanding that people have different ways of working and understanding why that is, that they might have different ways of working if they have worked in, you know, other countries, for example, I'll say, or even other types of workplaces. So even for myself, as somebody who is moving from, you know, outside of a nonprofit, and the first nonprofit job that I received, it was, I'll say it was different, right? There was diversity there. So there, in terms of, you know, that word of diversity, just there could be lots of differences that people experience when they come into your workplaces. But really, I will say, like, really focusing now on equity and inclusion. So I actually want to share an example of what I've done with one of the organizations that I've supported, which is Volunteer Alberta. So really looking at how can we be equitable when it comes to our recruitment practices? And something that is important to me personally, and also sharing this with employers and organizations, is how do we try to minimize any bias that we have in our recruitment processes? And when we're also like going through the whole aspect of it. So from our job posting, how we're conducting our telephone pre-screens, how we are doing our interviews, who's sitting in our interviews, how we are determining even like salary. So one of the things that Volunteer Alberta has implemented is that when we're looking at screening candidates, is that we're actually using a tool, and it's an Excel spreadsheet that we have implemented, and how we assess those candidates is actually based on the criteria that we have put down on our job posting. And that criteria is based on the job description. So when we are looking at those resumes, we have a basis for, we have identified this is the criteria that we are seeking from candidates when we're looking at qualifications. And we use that Excel spreadsheet and that tool to assess those candidates on the criteria that we have stated. So it doesn't, you know, eliminate bias, but it tries to minimize the bias so that everybody and it's the hiring team. So it's not just based on one person that's using the tool. So it could be based on a number of people that are using the tool. So whether that be, you know, maybe 3 people that are on your hiring team are looking at these resumes. And another practice is even the removal of names from resumes. And I've done that in the past as well, so that I have an identifier that might be a number or a letter. And that's how that person is identified in the screening tool. And then we use we use the screening tool, each individual that's on the interview team, the hiring team, and then we identify, let's say, the top 3 to 5 candidates that we would like to move forward with to an interview, for example, or a telephone pre-screen. So that can minimize some of that bias in recruitment. And then how it's actually further been used by Volunteer Alberta is actually they have used that same tool to in determination of the salary of the person that they wanted to make the job offer to. And so they, again, based it on the criteria and then based it on the match of the individual to that criteria, and then using a calculation to determine salary. And I think they're really, I will say, the response from the person that you're making an offer to, when they understand how the salary has been determined, even though if it was maybe not their ideal, is that there's actually this appreciation, because they do know that we have gone through a process where sometimes organizations have a range and they just say, well, where do we think this person is going to fit? And it might be one person determining that, or maybe a couple, but there's no kind of process around how they determine that. So I think there's actually an appreciation from candidates that there has been a practice that's been put in place so that we can try to be equitable with how we have determined like salary, and then a way that we can kind of, again, minimize any type of bias and try to be equitable in the recruitment process. So that's, I think, one example that I wanted to share. I will also say when it comes to being inclusive, that is also something that I think is extremely important to also think about, especially in a remote or hybrid work environment, is how are we, again, it's with regards to engagement and how are we including people in conversations and in processes, getting, feedback is important. So there are a number of things actually I believe that organizations can do when you're looking at doing things with with diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, and really also I would say to organizations is that sometimes they feel they have to make lots of changes or like do significant things. And really I look at it like there could be just a few things that could be changed initially. It doesn't have to be, big changes, but you could start making some smaller changes if you really want to start looking at doing things with a more equitable lens, for example. So yeah.
Thanks, Violet. Those are some great examples, and I'm glad to hear our executive member, Volunteer Alberta, is putting equity at the forefront. So that's awesome. I will move on to our next question. So it's not uncommon for social purpose organizations to hire an in-house HR person, use another employee or volunteer that may not specifically be trained in the field to fill in those gaps, or even outsource their HR needs to another firm. Can you share some of the benefits for social purpose organizations to hire access for their HR needs?
Yeah, I'll just say for myself personally, I've been working within like a shared service model for many years. I started actually over 8 years ago, working for a number of organizations that identified that they wanted to use a shared service model. So it's actually something that is kind of close to my heart, and I have seen the real value and benefit of using this model. So as somebody now who works with a number of organizations, I really feel like that I'm happy to be on the Access team because I think first of all, they truly do understand and value the benefit of this type of model. And when I'm talking with organizations and cooperatives about about access and this model, I feel that there is an advantage that we bring because we have this opportunity that we have worked with a number of organizations, and I will say the issues and challenges that are brought forward by those organizations are not isolated to one organization. So it's quite common that when I'm talking with a cooperative or a nonprofit, that they're bringing forward something that I've probably have heard before, right? Or they're experiencing a challenge or an issue. So I think that it is. I have seen that it's actually comforting to an organization or to an executive director or CEO who sometimes can feel actually quite isolated and feel like they have to know how to solve every problem and all the problems that their organizations face and that they face as a leader. So I actually feel that we are in a fortunate situation that we can help organizations because we probably have heard about their challenge or their issue before and likely may have some strategies, I will say, in our toolkit to address what those are. And the great thing about it is that those strategies that we do is it really is going to be tailored to that organization. So it's not a one size fits all kind of a strategy or a solution. However, that being said, is that it is the understand like Access and myself and the people involved do have understanding of community and our organizations are about community and making an impact. So I think keeping that in mind does make us a little bit unique, say to other providers that might be providing some similar type of services, because we do have the understanding about the community-minded work that is happening in our workplaces. So I think that is a benefit. I also feel that with organizations that I work with, sometimes they just have a they have a need that is just a very kind of urgent need or a short-term need that they need some supports. So instead of looking at hiring somebody to bring somebody on board, or looking at a resource of, there's sometimes limited funds to be able to do this, is that having some expertise to help you maybe just with one issue or one problem that you have, or maybe you're recruiting, one difficult role that you've been struggling to find somebody, is that we can come in and be able to work with you maybe on a short-term basis, or resolve that issue that you have, and then it gets done, right? And we've done our work, and there's no expectation to continue on. Although sometimes I will say that the organizations I work with might call me later down the road and have another different issue that they need some supports with. So which I'm happy to help. So I think that there's benefits in terms of access and the shared service model that I really think are really good in terms of understanding what some of the challenges and what maybe some of the supports our organizations need.
I agree completely. Well, Violet, thank you so much for that valuable insight. We have learned that human resource field is complex and ever changing. HR support is a must for social good organizations like co-ops and nonprofits, whether it's as needed or on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to turn this over to Kareen. We do have time to take a few questions from the group. So if you wouldn't mind just popping it into the chat or unmuting and asking, Kareen will take over from here.
Thank you, Danny and Violet. Yeah, so just before I jump into some questions, I just wanted to say that I recognize some of the names from some connections that I've made along the way that are actually HR service providers. So just wanted to encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about Access and what we do, to just come visit us on our website, which is sharedservices.coop. And if you're interested in learning more and the potential of becoming a service provider through Access, please take the time to fill out our contact form, choose the service provider one, and that would be just great for us to continue a conversation. So yeah, is there any questions from the floor? And then if not, I have a couple here. So it's always an awkward thing. So I had a couple come up for me from my board, and I think the one thing that they were wondering about was, and Violet, I guess this question is for you. So what are the top 3 HR policies every organization should have in place?
3 policies. So I work with organizations that will come to me and they have not really any policies, no handbook or anything like that. But often it's because maybe an issue has come up, or their employees have questions. So really the first thing I would say is to look at what are legislative policies that you should have in place as an employer. So there are currently some under occupational health and safety that are requirements to have. So I think that would be the first start that I would say, and my first recommendation. So one of the policies that I've been working with a number of organizations on is actually respectful workplace policy. And then also looking at how to roll that out to their employees, and have been helping them to roll that out to employees. So I would say the first thing would be look at what is a requirement for with regards to legislation of what policies are required. And then that would be a good starting point. The second thing I would say is that a handbook, an employee handbook, can be helpful. And sometimes that can be a very daunting task, especially with some organizations that I've worked with that are like fairly new grassroots organizations that may have just been, just starting up right now. They really don't know what should be in a handbook, but then they start, and then the reason why they come to me, or they'll say we need a handbook now, is because their employees, they're becoming more than one employee, and they're getting all these questions that are around maybe hours of work or paid time off, or you know, a number of different questions that they have. So I think another one would be looking at creating a handbook. But again, what works for you? What aspects of a handbook are important for your staff to have right now, and to kind of be engaged in the process as well? Because often we might have thoughts around what should be in a handbook, but really we don't want something that people are just going to put into, you know, into their desk and never look at, right? So things that are relevant to employees, I think are good things to start off with policies. I think there's lots of policies that you could create, but it always starts off with, as you get questions around things, and then employers and organizations start thinking, oh, we should actually put something in place in writing because we're getting questions around this now. So so I think that that's important, to kind of be in tune with what your employees are needing and asking about.
Thank you, Violet. I know last year I had the privilege of starting on that journey with you, developing a handbook for our employees through my other work, and it certainly was, your support was definitely appreciated. So thank you for that. Danny, I think this question would be for you. So, and maybe not, you can defer it to Violet if you like. We don't have the budget for an HR person. Can we get HR assistance through Access as needed?
Sure, I can take this. So part of our process once an inquiry comes in is to book an assessment with the client and go over their specific needs. And then from there, Violet and I come up with a plan, and it's presented to the client. And so they are able to opt into an on need basis, just, you know, to that specific issue, or if there's something more complex that needs a bit more time, or they need monthly coaching, that could be available as well. But yes, you can obtain services through Access just for that one issue, to get help from Violet or one of our other very knowledgeable HR providers.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So we have an inquiry from I'm going to say the floor. And so it's, I'm the HR manager for a community living organization working with people with diverse abilities. We have had recruitment success in the Fraser Valley and Greater Vancouver area, but up in Kelowna, where we've seen significant challenges in having potential quality applicants and ultimately new employees. Do you have any recruitment strategies for finding new staff in a challenging market for us? And it says we've been active on online job sites such as Indeed, have org careers webpage, staff referral incentives, etc.
Yeah, so thank you, Colin, for that question. I also do work with organizations that work with people with diverse abilities as well. And I do believe in general, I'll say there can be a challenge to find employees. I think that you're doing all the right things in terms of looking at how you've been active with how you're recruiting. So using the job boards, your website, referrals from your staff, which are great. I would also add continuing to use like LinkedIn, social media. But I think another approach is also looking at, are there organizations in that community or that town or city that are actively supporting job seekers? And is there a way that you can connect with those organizations so that you actually can go and do a presentation about, this is what my organization is about, these are the jobs that we're hiring, but not just that aspect, but a little bit about, this is our workplace culture, these are our values, this is how you can make an impact. So again, some of those things that you can, that sometimes don't get translated from a job posting, if that makes sense. Like often we'll look at a job posting and we see the words, but it doesn't really capture kind of the essence of who you are and how you work and why your work is important. So what I would say, Colin, is try to get connected with also all the organizations in that community that are working with job seekers as another avenue. And then also ways to get connected with maybe groups of people that maybe have not considered you know, your organization or the type of work that you're doing, or maybe they're people that are, let's say, young adults, or maybe newcomers to the area, or maybe people who are at the end of their career, like people who are semi-retired. Is there opportunities for them, for you to hire them, or would they have qualifications that you're looking for? So it does take a little bit of creative strategies, I'll say, because I think you're doing some good things, but then also connecting with job seekers or job organizations, thinking about maybe who's looking for employment or who hasn't considered employment but could be open to maybe some employment, and how do you reach out to those individuals, and just try to always be thinking. Another way too is sometimes when I talk about like how do you demonstrate who you are as an organization in a job posting, is also sometimes people do videos, or they have testimonials of their staff, or videos, you know, showing the community that they serve. So that might be a creative way also to try to show people kind of what the role would be, and why it's important, and the impact that they could make on people.
Thanks, Violet. And I was also thinking too of the one group that we're working out of Edmonton that supports newcomers. So that might be something too, Kelowna, I believe. Sorry, Colin, I know Kelowna has one or two organizations that support newcomers as well. So that might be a place. Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, so I don't see, is there anyone else on the floor that has one to pop in? Okay, so then I just have one last one here. We're having performance issues with an employee. Would you be able to help with that?
Yeah, that's a pretty common service, I'll say, that I provide to leaders and employers, anything related to like performance management. So sometimes there's processes in place, sometimes there's no processes in place, sometimes people have conversations and things don't change, or they don't have a process on conversations. So there's a number of ways that I mean, you know, that I do that. Sometimes it's looking at having a workshop on crucial conversations and how to have crucial conversations. Sometimes it's just one-on-one. Like I recently, for one of my clients, I did some coaching with one of their leaders, just in terms of creating some awareness of their communication style, how they communicate, the word choices that they make, and how that could be perceived by people. And it was actually just creating awareness around that, because that individual wasn't actually really aware of when they say this, that a person may interpret it this way, or this is what they may be feeling or thinking. So there's a number of ways that we could do like that. I've done that with coaching, with doing workshops, with looking at documents on how you receive and give feedback. So there's lots of, I think, ways that when it comes to, challenges that you may have with employees of how we can tackle that. And it would just start with me having a conversation, or whomever the service provider would be, having a conversation to understand that. And then what it is that we could provide you with and to support you with. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, so not seeing any more questions. I would encourage our participants to visit us on our website. If you are from a social purpose organization and wish to learn more about the services that we provide, you can connect with us through the website. We'll call you back and make a time to help walk you through what we do, and we encourage you to share the word about Access, because we are built, we say we're built by social purpose organizations for social purpose organizations. So any word of mouth would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, and if you have any other questions after this event, please, again, you can use one of the email addresses and connect through us there. And just want to thank you for taking the time out over your lunch, and for sitting through and connecting with us. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Holly. Nice to see you.